to the north to build Egypt, Meru, Napata, Nubia, Kush, Habashat, Aksum. That is the migration to the north. And we get now to in contact with the people of the Middle East and the people of the Mediterranean who were in the southern part. Now you can say the Semites and others. Now to the south, we came down to build kingdoms of Monomotapa, Mani Congo, Baganda, Bunyoro, and we come down. Monomotapa right to the south. To the west, we'll talk about Songhai, Mali, and those kingdoms. And to the east, we talk about Tanganyika and the ancient empires that extend in the land of the Kikuyu in Kenya, and all the way into Sofala and Kilwa in the land of the Shangani people in Mozambique. Now, this is when you talk about those histories of Timbuktu, Sofala, Kilwa, you're not talking about the beginning of the black man. When you talk about the history of Egypt, Kush, Ethiopia, you're not talking about the beginning of the black man. Neither are you not talking about the civilization of the black man. The first civilization was a human civilization, where things were based on the human value, the respect for human personality, the human spirit. It was based on that before it extended to other things. Now, when we fragment, when we move away from that particular homogeneous society that developed what we call the great knowledge system, or in English and in other books, the great Credo Mutwa will refer to it as the great belief system, the great belief, which was developed by the mothers of our people, that when we move away from the original land, we even felt like we even fear to move without carrying that with us. Now, it is something that was ingeniously tailored with the mind, the psychology, the philosophy of the black person. That is the origin of our so-called mythologies, our legends, our epics. They come from one source, which was our great knowledge system, which was developed by these particular ancient mothers. Now, our common knowledge, our common philosophy, even the basis of our common religion, when we started to drift into religion, because religion is a deification of culture. When the culture get deified, when we begin to deify the first builders of the culture, which is the mothers in our culture, our mothers, and we begin to worship our mothers, we begin the concept of God. Then we worship the mothers, moving outside of ourself and realization of ourself being the God, the makeup of the God, because the ancient knowledge of our people was like, ours was different from the foreigners. The foreigners teach us that God created man and created man with a separate soul and make man different from God and prepare himself and prepare men to punish men after men die. You see, it's different thinking. Our people say God exists because we exist. The soul of God exists because our soul exists. Without us existing, God can't exist. Where the reason God exists, that's why I tell you that we decided and conceptualized who God is. And our first concept of God, our God was mother. Because that is where naturally it makes sense. Who's the first person to look up to you, to look after you when you first came in here? Your mother. She first gave you her breast. You know, when you just came out, lost out of the womb, she nourished you with her breast. She kept you in her warm hands. She kept you. She inspired you. She built your personality. She built your ego. She built you who you are. She gave you name. She nourished you. Well, I'm talking about a child in essence, whether a child without a father or with a father. And without a father become more convenient example. Because that is where you see the mother and the child. But even in most cases, it's the child and the mother. Because even in this culture of the Bantu people is that men have to abstain away from the child for a particular period of time after the child is born. Then the child and the mother issue become a woman affair. It is the elderly women, it is the midwife, it is all these women who get involved in the rearing and the beginning and the introduction of the child. I mean every child, male and female child, their first entrance into the world. So it could logically make sense to these particular people who were logically thinking in this way, who were orientated in this particular philosophical orientation to see their mothers as their God. It's philosophy that can make you arrive to that conclusion that I come from my mother's womb. The first heaven I know is my mother's heaven. It makes sense why I'm always so attached to my wife. because I was socialized and brought into this world to first trust in the woman. So I'm living in the world that has built a dependence on a woman. And this world is so ungrateful that it doesn't detail this thing. I was telling Mara earlier today that, you know what? Let me tell you what happened in the very beginning. And in the context of Western religion, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, religion was created by insecure men to control women. Simple. That is why, in this thinking, in this particular way, adultery is only designed for the woman. It's not for the man. You know, they always tell you about the woman who was caught in adultery. But in the practical sense, it's always the woman who leads the woman. The man is always the man who lead the woman into adultery. Because the man come and whisper sweet nothing in the ears of the woman, and the woman buy it and get into this whole situation. In Islam, it goes the same way. In Sudan is the biggest contention. When they talk about Sharia law, it's always the woman getting stoned for adultery. They don't tell about men. You understand me? Now, Judeo-Christian Islamic thinking and religion, it is diametrically and naturally created against the feminine principle, and the first representative of that feminine principle being the black woman. And I don't understand why black woman should subscribe to this kind of hostile thinking. Even the Rastafarians for that particular matter, because you see, it is in the Nyabingi, which it is the first and the best way for us Rastafarians to identify with that kind of thinking, that they identify with the woman, the greatest woman, Nyabingi. Something that we can all relate with in terms of strength and valor, and still respect the woman. But it is in the same thinking in the doctrines of the guidelines. They say the woman cannot stand in the altar. Then that is artificial, because Nyabingi, the true Nyabingi, African Nyabingi, it is centered around the woman. The name is the woman. Abajirwa, which is called the priest of Nyabingi, but Jirwa, it is predominantly women. They were males, yes, but predominantly woman, because this is simple. It is dependent on feminine spirituality. Why do we get this idea of feminine spirituality? Simple. 9 months of your stay in the womb, whose air were you breathing? Your mother's air, until the umbilical cord was cut. So which is the first basis breath of life? Your mother's breath. So which is the first basis breath of humanity? Feminine spirituality. Simple. Biology. You know, that is my biggest problem, that I don't understand people with PhD in biology and still believe that a child can be born without sexual intercourse. That is the basis of Christianity. So any educated black man who have PhD and is a Christian, they make us question the credibility of education in the world of the blacks. That it makes black people still think and subscribe to this kind of nonsensical thinking. Now, this is different realms of things. Now, let's cut it down to religion. What is the law of our people said the religion come from? The law of our people said the religion come from the hunters. Mainly in the stone and bone age, when they were making very inferior weapons. When men fail to catch an animal or hit a particular animal, he automatically attributed that failure of marksmanship to some external force which is conspiring against him, which is the devil. Now, forces of nature which are naturally dual, like the poles, like polarities, north and south, male and female, men started to antagonize, create dual antagonism in these naturally dual forces. It is natural to have the north and the south. It is natural to have the male and the female. But it is not natural for the male and the female to have antagonism. Because the male and the female is the natural opposite of the other. That is why in our concept of God is that it takes the male and the female to have a God, because God is a complete complement. There have to be this completion to have God now. Because this is one part that God as a creator, there's one thing that the woman cannot do alone is to have a child. And there's one thing that the man cannot do alone is to have a child without the woman. So they both interdependent and need one another to manifest this particular act of creativity, procreation. That is why in this thinking we say human beings were not artificially created by some deity or a god in the sky. We say human beings were sexually created. That is why in English that kind of act, it is called procreation. The act of creating. This particular procreation, it is premised from the concept that sexual interaction is for procreation, spiritual elevation, regenerations. Now these things were premised on the foundational basis of why is life and why there should be life and why there will always be life. It is a necessity that is based on the understanding that one thing that life, you should understand that life cannot be created. Life comes from life. You cannot tell us about the infinite that have the finite. You cannot tell us about the eternal, but you tell us about the created part of the eternal. You know, that in the beginning. No, we don't have that. Ours is at the beginning of a particular period, but there is no total beginning of everything that some people somewhere build that. Now, we come from the hunter society, hunter-gatherer society. We have moved away from the holistic society of the Bantu people, when the people used to eat what they saw, when the people never used to get sick, when the people never used to need to be educated, when the people were educated by natural interaction with nature. Yeah. Now we move to the point of how religion was created. It is coming with ethnization. When we get ethnical group, when we diversify, then when we build at tribes, now when we hunt, we cannot catch, when we cannot explain natural phenomena, when we move away from our natural habitat from the tropics, and we go to some dry areas, and then we build a religion. And we started to have a concept of the eternal outside of us. So this is like a brief of everything. Like you can appreciate, I said 2,000 years, so it's a brief.
Yes, sir.
So do you have any questions? So what do you think is the future for black people worldwide? I mean, what should we be striving, in our quest for our identity? Is part of would you say we need to learn the languages, come to Africa, learn the language, learn who we are?
I think we need to learn who you are. We need to tap into our ancient consciousness, what really used to characterize us as a homogeneous society. Because eventually all philosophical school and idyllic school, they talk about unity is strength. Africa must unite, unity of the Africans. But we should have something that we unite around, which is our common identity, which is only embraced on a secular level, that here we come from one woman from East Africa called Lucy or Dinkinesh. But we should break it down to the consciousness that permeated that particular society. What kept us? If you think of, we moved away from 200,000 years ago to 150,000 years as a homogeneous people. We had a one binding thinking which is still around. We need to tap into that. It begins with our true name, our true identity, our true philosophy, our true world view, our true ideas of life. I think that it will begin. And hence it come up, as they say, with the consciousness of the people. It should embody the people's consciousness.
Yes, I.
Yes, I. Rastafari.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Is anything okay?